Welcome to the Sustainable Clinical Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Sarah Smith. I am a practicing rural family physician and the charting coach. This is the podcast for physicians and advanced practice providers who are ready to step back from the busyness of their clinical day to share ideas, question everything, and redesign their clinical day. We are redesigning clinical medicine to create sustainable clinical days and create time for our lives outside of medicine. Join us for discussions with world experts who are helping design sustainable models of clinical medicine and the physicians or clinicians who have discovered or designed sustainable models of clinical medicine for themselves. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. We're so delighted to have you here today. And today we have with us Dr. Fabienne Moore, who is going to introduce herself to us.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for having me and for the chance to introduce myself. I am a physician by training, and I am currently a physician and physician executive coach. I work with leaders one-on-one, and I also offer group coaching, and I'm based in Atlanta.
Perfect. All right. So let's go back to your beginnings in medicine or beginnings somewhere in your story about your journey as you started this career and the things that happened.
Origin stories, so important, right? It, probably different from many of the guests on your podcast, certainly the folks who I've had a chance to listen to. My origin story actually goes back to when I was in residency. I was a categorical general surgery resident at a level 1 trauma center, and I was a few years in when I had the realization, like, wow, this is not my work.
Mm-hmm.
Which sounds so simple to say with the benefit of 20 years of hindsight, but you can imagine how completely earth-shattering that kind of insight was in the moment. And this was long enough ago that there really weren't non-traditional paths for folks with clinical degrees. So I remember reaching out to mentors, reaching out to deans at my medical school, and no one could offer me any guidance. So I wound up just having to say, even not knowing what can be next for me, I know that this is not for me. And I could feel how the demands and the stresses of the work, like, your focus on sustainability and burnout, I was becoming a person who I didn't want to spend the rest of my life being in response to those pressures. And so I left.
Got
3
it.
simple words, a lot in them.
Absolutely. Tell us, why did general surgery pique your interest? And then what was it about general surgery that was not your work? So kind of how did you come to that revelation? So why did you want to be there to start with?
2 things about general surgery. Apparently, when I was about 5 years old, I made the declaration that I was going to be a surgeon and a prima ballerina. Prima ballerina fell by the wayside, surgeon did not. And then I have a vivid memory of the first case I scrubbed in on as a third year, and that moment when we broke through the peritoneum and the bowel it was an obstructive case, right? So the bowel kind of ballooned up, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. Just amazing.
Love it. So good. So good.
And then, there was the reality of the intensity of the work. And when you catch yourself more, I have a very vivid memory, and I'm guessing at least some of your listeners will identify with this, of rounding in the ICU one day and thinking, God, it sure would be nice to lay down like that. And I was like, oh, okay, that's a that's a red flag.
Okay, so there's the general surgery and then trauma surgery. Now, they're not the same thing. Had you explored different types of surgery because something pulled you towards this trauma center?
Yeah.
Tell us about
Well,
that.
so I had intended to go on through to a fellowship. So it was important to me that I match at a high level academic center where I'd have a broad range of exposure as a trainee. And because it was a level 1 trauma center, most of what we did our first few years of training was trauma. We did other things, but it was a lot of trauma based work.
And what did on-call what was the demand like when you were a resident? So what sort of kind of hours were you pulling? What did it look like to be you in that time?
I'm going to date myself for at least those in the those who are listening in the US. This was long before the 80-hour work week. So I was in the days of Q2 on call for 36 hours
Okay, yeah,
routinely.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm guessing there's not a lot of sleeping time in those 36 hours.
No.
Mm,
No. No, no, no. I learned very quickly the order of operations was eat when you can eat, void when you can void, and then if you're lucky, take a 20-minute nap.
yeah, yeah. And that is
Yeah.
exhausting on a human physiology.
Absolutely.
And how long were you in that kind of busyness when you kind of had the realization that no way, I'm not doing this, this is not my work?
Yeah, for me, it was a couple years in. I was about 2.5 years in, and there's another interesting, well, I'll say relevant aspect of my story that I now know about myself is that there's a particular neurotype called the highly sensitive person, and it turns out I have one of those highly sensitive nervous systems, and we are particularly vulnerable to sleeplessness, low blood sugar, high stimulation, high input environments, and unrelenting paces. So it was just it's actually really healing to over like a decade and a half later realize like, oh wow, like there was just something as important as that work is, there was maybe just a fundamental lack of fit, right,
Mm-hmm.
between my wiring and what that environment demanded of folks.
Yeah. What was the feedback you were getting about your performance and things? Was there anything on that level that was suffering, or is it really it was an internal journey?
It was primarily internal, and it's one of the things that I'm committed to in my work with leaders now is supporting them in developing their ability to communicate effectively with their teams and give feedback because I don't remember that any of it's hard to say the grown-ups, any of the attendings around me were actually able to give me skillful feedback or, offer support that might help me redirect. And that's not a judgment, right? That's just a recognizing that their experience hadn't necessarily equipped them right, to be present to their trainees in that way.
Wow, interesting. And
Yeah.
did you tell anyone that you were suffering before you went off to the dean and the program director about what you were experiencing? And did any I'm guessing the other residents were having a similar awful
Oh, I'm sure.
experience, but I don't know what you guys talked about. Was that a thing that you would talk about?
It was just the thing, right? That's how it was. That was the work. That was the pace of the work. That was the lifestyle. That was the expectation. And so we all, we would get together and blow off steam about it, but there was certainly never any sense that it should or even could change, right? It's just the nature of the beast.
Mm, okay, so you're all suffering together.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's feeling miserable.
Yeah,
And you're
like I
like, this is not for
remember
me.
one of my co-interns, like one of the games we would play is where and how many times did you fall asleep while driving home?
Ooh,
Right?
wow.
That was kind of one of the themes of our stories that we shared, which
Wow.
again, like in hindsight, is just horrifying.
Is there breaks? Is there annual leave? Like, is there any end to the relentlessness of residency? Or as it had been?
That's such a good question, Sarah. I'm going to say I'm sure we were given vacations. I remember it feeling unrelenting, but I'm
Mm.
using that language very deliberately.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's okay. It's okay. So then you were like, okay, this is not for me. I need an
Yeah.
alternative. And you then go and seek advice. Who did you go and see?
I spoke with the dean of students at my medical school,
Hmm.
and I reached out to actually a dear family friend who she's now retired. She was an internist, so she had been something of a mentor to me along my journey. Um, and those were really the only resources I could think of. And of
Hmm.
course, talk to friends, but they didn't know any more about the situation than I did. So it was very much a leap into the unknown.
Yeah. And did they say there's no way you can switch residency or different pathway? Like what were you looking for? What did you ask for?
I think I was just probably saying, help, I don't know what to do. I'm not even sure that I had high quality questions. And I did actually wound up doing some clinical research at the institution where I was a trainee. So that was a transition out of the full on residency role. But yeah, just help. What should I do? That's a good question. We have no idea, and we wish you the best.
Wow. Okay. Okay. All right. So some clinical research. Was that fun? Exciting? Did you enjoy that one?
Yeah, it was definitely better. And it was really nice to be with the team in the lab. I very much enjoyed that.
Excellent. Okay. So there's a little bit of segue into something different, but then
Yes.
you did make it plan to do something different. How did that come about?
So I would love to say that I drew up a 10-year plan for how I would gracefully transition out of a clinical career, pay off my loans from a private medical school, and still contribute beautifully to society. Probably more accurately, a bit of creative bumbling and divine intervention. I also have my master's in public health, and so I wound up doing some work in public health. I got a job working on a CDC contract in health
Mhm.
communications, and I did that for a few years. And then I was also on the side doing some tutoring, and that led to some teaching. And I learned, oh wow, I really love, I have a skill for, and I find a real joy in teaching, facilitating, leading courses, which I hadn't done much of before. So
Mhm.
that combination of healthcare, public health communications led to me submitting my resume to a healthcare research and consulting firm based in DC called the Advisory Board Company. And I wound up working for them for about 12 years. And I was one of the spokespeople for the organization. So presenting at conferences, working with hospital boards, walking them through our research on strategy and operational best practice. And then I moved over into leadership development. And that was really where it all came together for me because it was an opportunity to combine my interest in people, what I know about medicine, my time as an insider, also the
Mhm.
perspective I had gained as a front row outsider, and then presentation. So I did that for many years, and that then led to me. I was recruited to serve as the vice president of physician development for a nationwide multi-specialty practice. And then from there, I stepped out on my own and I now run my executive coaching and leadership development consultancy.
Wow. Okay. Very good. So what was it about the non-clinical things that helped you stay there? So you've got now this new job, you're there for 12 years, and is is that more sustainable? Like how come that was fun? Well, how come you stayed there for 12 years?
Yeah, so it's interesting, and this is something that I see a lot of my clients, so I'm guessing it will resonate. That work was differently not so sustainable from clinical work. So it was
Okay.
consulting, it was travel, 3 to 4 cities a week for
Hmm.
8 straight years. And part of it was just my nervous system was accustomed to functioning at that pace and at that
Mhm.
rate, and that's what felt normal to me, right? And also, to be fair, the first few years, it was exciting. Traveling, seeing parts of the country I've never been to before. How many people can say, unless they're from there, I've been to Paducah, Kentucky 3 times, or, I've been to just parts of the country I never would have seen on my own, right? And meeting people. And hearing the things that are universal and evergreen in healthcare, and also what are the unique things in this community, in this medical staff, in this hospital.
Interesting. Okay, so it was sustainable and unsustainable. I'm presuming
Sustainable
you've got.
for a point, and then it became unsustainable.
What about like you outside of this job? So what was happening kind of on your personal level while you're doing all these, like that's a lot of travel.
Yeah, it was. It was. Um, it's funny, like I like to say that that work for the advisory board was like me kind of earning my MHA. They paid me to right for me to earn my unofficial MHA. And then for me there was this parallel journey of personal development work and exploration. So I got into I started practicing yoga, I started practicing meditation. I have technically, it's 4 different yoga teacher training certificates, a variety of lineages that I wanted to bring in. I started riding horses and also doing groundwork with horses and like equine facilitated experiential work. And so there was this, as I was kind of, busy and traveling and being very like corporate, there was
Mhm.
also this deeper vein emerging of really exploring like who am I, who do I want to be, and even, just some of the philosophical like how do I want to move through the world? What is the world? What are we all doing here?
You had mentioned before we started talking about as you transitioned out of residency, you were doing some work with horses. Where did that come from? Tell us about that.
Mm, yeah. So I first started riding horses when I was a little girl, like 5 years old. And I rode for a few years and then we moved. And I think I was young enough that it didn't occur to me that there might also be horses in this new place. So I just never asked. And then when I was transitioning out of residency, I started riding again. And this is another thing that I work with my coaching clients on, and I offer this to anyone, the importance of following even the tiniest glimmer and to find a place that can nourish you,
Mhm.
that can, right, like a place that can feel safe where you can relax. And for me that happy place became the barn. Even when I wasn't riding, I would just put a 5 pound bag of carrots in my car, drive out to the barn with a folding chair, and just post up in the pasture and spend an hour or two just being with the horses, right? Like come home post call Saturday, sleep for 2 hours, go sit in the pasture. And having that place, whether it's a pasture, the park, your bathtub, but creating that place for yourself where you can start to
Mhm.
just a little bit.
Yeah.
And horses are that place and those partners for me.
Very nice. Very nice. And what about the yoga? Why did that come in? Where did that come from?
Some of it just fitness,
Hmm.
and then I'm of that archetype where if I try something and I like it, well, then I must master it. And so it was really important to me to continue to develop and grow and really understand like not just the asana practice that we see in our heads and when we think of when we hear the word yoga, but what are the roots of this and yogic philosophy and really getting into the energetics and even the spiritual aspects that are expressed through the physicality of the practice.
Hmm. Hmm. I'm guessing that it's also transportable when you're traveling 3 different cities in a week.
100%. I found myself a 2 millimeter thick travel yoga mat. And I still have it to this day. I fold it up. It sits right on top of my 22-inch suitcase, and you just roll it out. And yeah, I could practice anywhere.
Perfect. Okay, so nice and easy to do.
Yeah,
Goes with you, travels easily. It's just important because even if we're in the hospital system or we're doing clinical work, having something that's able to be done easily. So I'm thinking the finding a barn won't be so
absolutely.
easy if you're in a different city, but having your
No.
yoga mat is easy.
And you don't even need a yoga mat, right? Like asana, the postures that we think of is just one aspect of yoga, right? there are things that you can do. And in fact, I'm hoping we'll have the opportunity that you and I might even explore some exercises. There are things we can do anywhere that are part of the yogic tradition that give us this opportunity to pause and shift ourselves, downshift from that sympathetic mode and more towards our parasympathetic, which, that's neurologically, that's what's going on, right? At the core of this move towards sustainability. Yeah.
Okay, well then let's do that then, so we can give people something that they can do to kind of practice this. Let's have it. Sounds
Perfect. Let's
fun.
do it. And this is something, even if folks are listening in their car, they can do this. You can do this in meetings, and no one has to know that you're doing it because you keep your eyes open.
Perfect. Sounds
And
good.
it's something called the five senses, and it's a noticing exercise. So, what we'll do is I'll offer the instruction. We'll do it together. You'll notice silently, and then just give me an okay when you're ready to move on. So, we may be a little bit out of sync with folks who are listening later, but that's fine. We're still all going to get the feel of the exercise.
Perfect.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with our sense of sight. And the invitation is to look around you, and that includes up, down, maybe even behind you, and find 5 objects. And rest your eyes on each of them in turn, just letting your eyes take in as much visual information: shape, size, color, movement, shadow. And when you've looked at those 5 things, just give me an okay.
Okay.
Okay. Next is texture. So if anyone is driving, let's keep one hand on the wheel and we'll take one hand off. And we're going to, in turn, 4 textures. Just gently rub your fingers and feel it. You could do your sleeve. You might choose your hair. Just experience and notice 4 textures.
Okay.
And now 3 sounds. Notice the volume, the pitch, the rhythm.
Okay.
Okay. 2 smells. Bonus if they're pleasant, they don't have to be.
You're all smelling your armpits, aren't you? No. I can smell
If
myself.
you have a cup of something, that works.
It does, yeah. Okay, yeah.
And then no judgment. We're going to notice the taste that's in our mouth.
Got it. Yeah.
So curious, how do you feel after doing all of that noticing?
I think it reorientates yourself to where you are right now. And I think that experience in itself is helpful, right? Otherwise, you can feel like you're being carried along by the day. Whereas if you pause and do these, I agree, you could do that in a meeting or while you're on the phone to someone in the busyness of your day. It can just bring you back to you. That you,
100%.
and even I notice I probably need to find some water, right? Interesting.
Yeah,
So that's
100%.
just a feedback. Yeah, it's a good feedback to
Yeah.
ourselves. Love it.
Yeah. And that's what it is. It's an exercise in presencing and coming into what's actually happening in this moment. We're moving so quickly, you're pulled in so many different directions in the course of a clinical day. Taking a moment to, like, I sometimes think of, like in the time travel movies where you're kind of like split across time, to bring all of yourself back together. And people also will frequently say that they find it very calming. That's not the point, but that is a consequence of coming into the present moment.
Yeah, calming
Yeah.
is important. I think when we're in the
Yes.
frustration, overwhelm, anxiety of the day, calming is great. Just having a moment of,
Yes.
oh.
Yeah. And what I love about exercises like the 5 senses and some of the other things I do with clients is, breath work is beautiful. And And that, the sort of the common wisdom of, oh, when you catch yourself feeling overwhelmed or overstimulated, stop and take 3 deep breaths. A couple of challenges with that. Number one, taking a big deep inhale actually puts you more into your sympathetic, according to polyvagal theory. So it can kind of backfire. Number two, that may not be that may actually be too abrupt of an override of where your nervous system is in that moment. Whereas something like I'm just gonna softly place my attention, that's more of a gentle invitation to
Mm.
pause and settle in. And it can be, yeah, there's something, I find that it's maybe more consistently nourishing regardless of where you are at baseline.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Perfect. Love it. So tell us
Nothing
about the
against deep breaths, to be clear, but they're just
true,
one
true,
tool.
true. Tell us about your work now. So, what do you do in your executive coaching practice, and who do you work with, and what sort of things are coming up in those spaces?
Yeah. So I work primarily with physician leaders and physician executives and helping them to get unstuck, reconnecting to their purpose, their energy, even like that vitality, right, of life force. So it's very much about finding sustainability on that leadership journey. And I think of my work as having 3 pillars. The first is what we just did, presencing self awareness, learning to notice myself, becoming present again to my experience, because particularly in surgery, although I would imagine it's not that different in the medicine, in medicine and the medical subspecialties, so much of our training numbs us to like what's happening in our body and what we need. So
Mm-hmm.
learning to reconnect and reattune to that. And then the second pillar is finding clarity. Another phenomenon I see, and I work with a number of like mid-career female physicians over the past couple of years, is, we reach this tipping point where there's the opportunity to shift from, I call it from applicant to author. So much of our early career is spent knocking on a set of doors, hoping one of them will open to let us in, and then
Mm-hmm.
trying to find our place in that room. And then we reach a moment where we maybe look around and we start to ask, well, do I want to be in this room? What kind of room do I want to be in? Do I want to be in a room at all? And those questions are beautiful and they're potent and they are so deeply disorienting for people, right? So being there to help someone start to figure out, like, gosh, what do I want to do? And maybe it's stay in practice. I've coached plenty of people who stay in practice with a different set of purpose, right? Animated more deeply in who they are now as an adult. And then there are other people who say, gosh, like there are other ways that I can serve and still honor the things that brought me into medicine.
Nice.
And then the third pillar of my work is maybe not a pillar at all. There's everyone who I work with, there's some other factor that's unique to them and their journey. And so teasing that out, holding the space for them where they can explore and figure out there's something kind of archetypal about this journey. And then what's my unique flavor of that archetype? Am I rainbow sprinkles or am I raspberry swirl? And how does that unfold for me?
Yeah. Okay. So that helps us with regards to kind of understanding what type of leader are you and what is interesting and important to you, and what rooms do you want to put yourself in, and what are you saying yes to? Why? What are your
Yes,
priorities? Yeah.
exactly.
Got it. Okay.
Exactly.
This is interesting work. I know that adding another role to a clinical situation is a lot of additional time and
Yes.
skills, and sometimes people don't feel supported in having the skills to move into that role. It's just simply the person who was in it left, and so somebody else needs to step up.
Yeah, yeah. And that's, I used to not at all, I used to unjokingly joke. Like, the reason that I had a career in physician leadership development is you're either tapped because you're maybe you're well liked, right? You're kind of universally liked and respected. Oh, okay. So everybody likes Sarah. Everyone can talk to her. So we're going to tap her to lead the group. Or you were on vacation the day that we met and voted, and so you got nominated in absentia. But either way, so frequently as clinicians, and to be fair, this isn't unique to healthcare. I've now seen it happen across industries, but it definitely happens with us. It's we're thrown into these leadership positions without a lot of specific support and investment in developing our leadership skill. I have seen that start to change over the past 15 years. After all, right? Like I've had a nearly 2-decade career in physician leader development, and I still see lots of room for opportunity and lots of room for individuals who are considering a move like this to advocate for themselves and to be comfortable saying, like, I'm interested in adding this to my portfolio and stepping into this role. And I'm aware that it's totally different from what I've been doing as a clinician. What sorts of skill development and support are you going to offer me so that I can be successful for the sake of patients, the organization, and also my personal satisfaction?
Mm-hmm. Do you find people will, or physicians will start to look for opportunities to learn these leadership skills before applying for a position, or they tend to start looking for them once they are in the position?
Both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, there's a program that I work with through AMWA, American Medical Women's Association. We have an Elevate program, which is we take a cohort of female physicians through a group and one-on-one coaching experience. And most of our participants in that program are proactive. They're like, I know I want to move into leadership and I want to have some preparation. I want to just have a little bit more ground beneath me before I apply for that thing that I have my eye on. And I also know plenty of people who say yes, they jump in, and then they realize, oh, this water's a little bit deeper than was portrayed. And I could use some floaties or some flippers.
Got it. Yeah. We also hear in the research, just given that you're talking about women physicians, that many of them are often overqualified for the positions that they are applying for, that they've held themselves back thinking they didn't have a skill set or enough skill. Tell us more about what, if that's something you've encountered in your clients.
Absolutely. We've all heard that, what is it, like men will apply for a role if they have 70% of the qualifications. Women feel like they have to have 120%. So I 100% see that pattern. I will tell you though, more frequently, I see the pattern with my female physician leader clients of overcommitting. So, one of my favorite things that I like to do with folks is something that I call a role audit. We get on a Zoom together, I open a Word document, and we say, okay, what are all of that, just at work, right? Just within the hospital or the clinic setting, what are all of the hats that you're wearing? And then let's list what are all of the things that each of these hats requires of you. And
Mm-hmm.
I've never not had it be an aha moment of, oh, that's why I feel the way I do. Because,
Yes.
from a beautiful place, right? From a desire to serve, a desire to contribute,
Yeah.
I keep saying yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's such a great exercise to do, is write down all the things you're doing and what they require of you. I mean, just that pause to say, oh, no wonder I have so many things in my calendar and I don't have any time for myself, whatever else that you're saying to yourself on the
Exactly.
regular. This sounds like a really good exercise.
Yeah, yeah. And then, what we do with that is typically I've already done some values clarification work, which is another thing that fascinates me, how few of us in the course of our education and professional journey have ever identified what are my values. We've been told what's important, we've been given expectations to meet, and
Yeah.
by golly, we are good at doing that, right? But getting clear on what's my why. So we can then take those values and use them as a filter for reviewing what we've captured in that audit. And then typically that tees up some uncomfortable, important, really powerful conversations about what they will continue to say yes to and what they will start to say no thank you to.
Give us an example of a values exercise. Like, what are we just saying? Are we saying like family and exercise, or are we trying to get a little deeper than that? What do you think is the
Deeper than that. So
okay?
I'll share with you the framework I use is actually one that was given to me by one of my coaches, Danielle Cohen. Oh God, I still think it's so beautiful. I'd love to talk about it. She invites folks to think of their values as a set of advisors. And so when you reach a key fork in the road, a key inflection point in your life, who do you want sitting around the table with you, being your partners in making that decision? I find that with many, not all, maybe not even most of my clients, we frequently go through that exercise twice. The first round is, family, honesty, service, lovely concepts. And they
Mm-hmm.
can be a little bit like world peace, apple pie, right? Things that we've inherited, more global things. And then as we start to get in and like wrestle with and like dance with these things, for many of us there is a deeper layer of like, oh, but like what's really alive for me? What's really the spirit in which I want to live my life? Show up to my family, whatever my family looks like, right? Be they biologically related or chosen. Show up to my colleagues, show up to my patients, right? What are those energies I want to bring?
Love it. Yeah, I think that's really helpful because sometimes we persecute ourselves for not keeping our values forefront, and we're not necessarily understanding when we say family, we may not even understand what about family is creating importance for us. So it's just nice to have your perspective of what that means.
And I love, Sarah, that you use the verb persecute because I have more than once seen people use their values that way, right? Like the
Mhm.
values then become yet another standard that
Yeah,
I'm measuring
yeah,
myself to
yeah.
versus allies and supports in my
Mm.
journey.
Yeah, yeah, super important. Excellent.
If
All
it's
right, how
making you
do
feel bad about yourself, it's not a value.
good one. There we go.
Yeah. Takeaway number one.
All right, perfect. So we can remove people from the table who love it. Okay.
Yes.
Where do people find you if they're interested to learn more about what you do?
Oh, thank you for that question. My website is simply my name, www.fabiennemoore.com, Fabiennemoore. And so there's information there about a little bit more about me, about my coaching practice, and there's also an opportunity to book a 20-minute meet and greet so we could meet each other and get to know each other a little bit better.
Excellent. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to bring forward today?
Hmm. There's one more thing that I want to share that frequently comes up in my work with the physician leaders who I coach. You know, we tend to think of memory as a purely cognitive process, and our memories being something that that live in our brains. Our memory is a supratentorial phenomenon. The reality, though, is that our memories are actually encoded in our entire nervous system. You know, they live in our bodies and they shape how we behave. And so I want to offer for any of our listeners who are feeling burnt out, who are feeling stuck in an unsustainable situation, and who, when it starts to feel like it's sort of a vicious cycle, those cycles can be broken, and it may not necessarily be something that we can purely talk ourselves out of. Sometimes, frequently, we also have to feel our way out of it. And also recognizing that what we do, the process we go through in our training as physicians, it is very demanding and it imprints itself on our nervous system. And so learning to recognize and work with those patterns, I believe, is really core on our individual and collective journey towards sustainability.
Love that. So interesting. Thank you for that. We've talked before with some other guests about how like trauma imprints and how our body will often respond before our brain even knows what's going on. And I think that you're right. The training that we are given in medicine to, put away the human demands, the bladder's full, I'm hungry, but there's a patient in front of me, so it's all going to be like put aside. You're right that is so imprinted and has a physical manifestation in you, not just a mental one. So interesting. Thank you for your time here today with us. This has
Thank
been
you
fun.
for inviting me. It's been such a pleasure to get to know you and to talk.
Yeah, and thank you for your work with leaders, because I think that you're right. We don't necessarily have the skill sets or training before we endeavor into a new role, or we want to learn before we move into a new role. So love it. All right, have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye. Thank you for being part of the Sustainable Clinical Medicine podcast. If you'd like to learn more or join us to help you get home with today's work done, go to chartingcoach.ca. There you'll find all the information on the premier Lifetime Access Charting Champions program that is helping physicians get home with today's work done, with all the proven tools, support, and community you need to create time for your life outside of medicine. We would love to see you there. Until next time, thanks for listening.